She was only a servant, or so I believed. A forgotten Georgian love story. Chapter 1. The House on Barton Lane.
I have lived a quiet life. That is not a complaint nor an apology, merely a fact, stated plainly as I have always preferred to state things. I am not a man of great events. History will not remember my name, and I have made my peace with that. But there are certain memories that do not require the weight of history to matter. They ask only to be told, once perhaps, before they fade entirely. This is one such memory. The house on Barton Lane was never grand. It was respectable, nothing more. A brick townhouse of modest proportion, inherited from my father and maintained, in the years that followed, by careful economy and quiet pride. My mother lived there still, and I with her, having returned from London after a brief and undistinguished attempt at the law. I was 27, old enough to feel the weight of expectation, young enough to resent it. The house had a particular stillness in those days. My father had been dead 3 years, and though we did not speak of grief, it lived in the rooms with us, in the drawn curtains of the front parlor, in the unplayed pianoforte, in the way my mother's voice softened whenever she passed his study door. We kept few servants. Mrs. Hewitt, our housekeeper, had been with the family since before I was born. She managed a house with brisk efficiency and asked little of us beyond clear instruction. There was a cook, a woman from the village, and a boy who came twice weekly to tend the garden and carry coal. And then, in the autumn of that year, there was Ellen. She arrived on a gray September morning with a single trunk and a letter of reference I never read. Mrs. Hewitt had arranged the hire. I was not consulted, nor did I expect to be. Servants came and went. It was not my concern. I saw her first from the window of my study, a figure in a dark cloak standing at the rear entrance, waiting to be admitted. She stood very still. That was the first thing I noticed. Most people shift their weight, glance about, adjust their clothing. She did none of these things. She simply waited, her face turned slightly away, her posture straight and quiet. I thought little of it then, a new housemaid, young and likely nervous. I returned to my book. But something in that stillness stayed with me. In the days that followed, I encountered her only in passing, a figure at the edge of the corridor, a shape bending over the hearth, a pair of hands setting the table in silence. She performed her duties well, Mrs. Hewitt reported, and caused no trouble. I should not have noticed her at all, and yet I did. There was something in the way she moved, not the hurried efficiency of a trained servant, but something slower, more considered. She walked as though she were thinking. She held herself as though she were listening, always listening, to something just beyond the room. Once, passing the drawing room, I saw her standing before the window, a cloth in her hand, her gaze fixed on the garden beyond. She was not working, she was not resting, she was simply looking. And in her expression, there was a kind of sorrow I did not understand. She turned, saw me, and lowered her eyes at once. "Forgive me, sir." Her voice was soft, careful, utterly correct. I nodded and walked on. But I remembered her face in that unguarded moment, the stillness of it, the depth, and I wondered for the first time what she had looked like before she learned to disappear.
Chapter 2. Small Observations. I have always been a man inclined to observation. It is not a virtue, precisely, merely a habit,
born perhaps of too many solitary hours, too many books read in silence, too many evenings spent watching the fire rather than joining the conversation. I notice things, small things, the way light falls on a page, the particular creak of a floorboard beneath a familiar step, the shift in someone's expression when they believe themselves unobserved. It was this habit, I think, that first made me uneasy about Ellen. The signs were small at first, so small that I might have dismissed them entirely had they not accumulated with such quiet persistence. There was the matter of her hands. A housemaid's hands should show the evidence of labor: reddened knuckles, roughened skin, nails worn short by work. Ellen's hands were not like this. They were pale and slender, the fingers tapering, the nails neat but uncalloused. When she set down a tray or adjusted a candlestick, her movements were precise, almost delicate, as though she had once been taught that even small gestures mattered. I told myself it meant nothing. Perhaps she had only recently entered service. Perhaps she had been fortunate in her previous situation. But I noticed. Then there was the matter of the book. It happened one afternoon in late September. I had left a volume of verse on the small table beside the drawing room window, an old edition of Cowper, nothing remarkable. When I returned to retrieve it, I found Ellen standing near the table, the book open in her hands. She was not dusting it. She was not moving it. She was reading. Her eyes moved across the page with an ease of long practice, her lips slightly parted, her expression one of quiet absorption. She held the book as a reader holds a book, not as an object to be cleaned, but as a companion to be consulted. I must have made some sound, for she looked up suddenly, and in that instant I saw something I had not expected. Not guilt, not fear, but a flash of recognition, as though she had been caught not in wrongdoing, but in honesty. She closed the book at once and returned it to the table. "I beg your pardon, sir," she said, her voice steady. "I was only setting the room to rights." I said nothing. I merely nodded and allowed her to pass. But I had seen her eyes, and I knew with a certainty I could not explain that she had understood every word on that page. After that, I began to watch her more closely, not with suspicion, but with a kind of puzzled attention. I did not seek her out. I did not alter my habits. I simply allowed myself to see what I had previously overlooked. And the more I saw, the less I understood. Her speech, when she spoke at all, was correct and unadorned. She used no dialect, no coarse expressions, no grammatical errors. Her sentences were simple, but they were formed with a care that suggested education, or at the very least, long exposure to educated company. Her posture, too, was unusual. She did not stoop or shuffle as servants often do, worn down by years of labor. She stood straight, her shoulders drawn back, her chin level. When she walked, there was a grace to her movements that seemed almost unconscious, as though her body remembered a way of being that her circumstances no longer permitted. Once, I passed the open door of the kitchen and saw her sitting alone at the long wooden table, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze fixed on some distant point. Mrs. Hewitt was speaking to her, giving instructions, I presumed, but Ellen's attention was elsewhere. She looked in that moment like a woman waiting. For what, I could not say. I did not speak to my mother of these observations. She little interest in the servants beyond their efficiency, and I could not imagine how I would explain my curiosity without sounding foolish, or worse, improper. And yet the question lingered. Who was this woman who moved through our house like a ghost, who dusted our shelves and lit our fires, and never once met my eyes without first lowering her own? She was only a servant. That is what I told myself. That is what I wished to believe. But late at night, in the silence of my study, I would remember the way she had held that book, gently, reverently, as one holds a letter from someone long absent, and I would wonder if I had ever truly seen her at all.
Chapter 3. A Letter Misplaced. It was a Thursday, I remember, in the second week of October. The morning had been unremarkable. I had taken breakfast alone, my mother having kept to her room with a headache, and afterward I had retired to my study to attend to correspondence. There were letters to answer, dull matters of business, inquiries from a solicitor regarding a small property my father had left in uncertain title, and I had delayed them long enough. I worked through the morning without interruption. By midday, my desk was cluttered with papers, and I had grown restless. I rang for tea and sat back in my chair, watching the pale autumn light shift across the carpet. It was Ellen who brought the tray. She entered quietly, as she always did, and set the tea things on the small table by the window. I did not look at her directly. I had grown cautious in that regard, aware that my attention might be misread by her, by the household, by myself. But as she turned to leave, something slipped from beneath her apron and fell to the floor. A letter. She froze. For a moment, neither of us moved. The letter lay between us on the carpet, a small folded sheet of paper, slightly creased, sealed with a wafer of plain red wax. It was not a servant's letter. The paper was too fine, the fold too precise. It looked like the kind of letter a gentlewoman might write or receive. Ellen's face had gone pale. She bent quickly to retrieve it, but I was closer, and without thinking, I reached down and picked it up. I did not open it. I would not have done so, but I held it for a moment, feeling the weight of it in my hand, and I saw her eyes. They were wide, unguarded, and full of something I had not seen in her before. Not fear exactly, but a kind of desperate stillness, as though she were holding her breath against some invisible blow. "Yours?" I asked. My voice was quieter than I intended. "Yes, sir." She held out her hand, and I saw that it trembled slightly. "Forgive me. I should not have brought it with me. I did not think—" She stopped, as though she had said too much. I placed the letter in her open palm. Our fingers did not touch, but she drew back as though they had. "It is no concern of mine," I said. "You may go." She curtsied and left the room without another word. But the image of her face, pale, stricken, utterly exposed, remained with me long after the door had closed. I told myself to forget the matter. A servant's private correspondence was not my affair. She was entitled to her secrets, as all people are, and I had no right to pry. And yet, the letter had not been written in a servant's hand. I had seen enough correspondence to recognize the difference, the careful, even strokes of someone trained to write well, the faint elegance of the script visible even through the folded paper. Whoever had written to Ellen had been educated, perhaps more than educated, and the seal, plain red wax, unadorned, spoke of discretion. A family crest would have been more usual for a letter of quality. The absence of one suggested concealment, a deliberate choice. I sat for a long time that afternoon, staring at the fire, the tea cooling beside me. Who wrote to her? And why did she carry the letter so close, hidden beneath her apron, as though it were something precious or dangerous? That evening, I passed the door to the servants' corridor and heard a sound that made me pause. It was weeping, soft, muffled, barely audible, the kind of weeping that does not wish to be heard. It came from somewhere within,
perhaps the small rune Ellen had been given near the kitchen. I stood in the dim hallway, my hand on the wall, and listened. I should have walked on. A gentleman does not linger at the threshold of a servant's grief, but something held me there. Not curiosity, not this time, but something quieter, something that felt almost like recognition. I had heard that kind of weeping before. In this very house, 3 years past, in the weeks after my father's death, the sound of someone mourning not with great sobs, but with small, stifled breaths, as though sorrow were something to be ashamed of. After a time, the sound faded. I heard a door close softly. I walked on. That night, I lay awake and thought of the letter. Not its contents, I would never know those, but its existence. The fact that somewhere, beyond this house, there was someone who knew her, someone who wrote to her in a fine hand on good paper with a seal meant to hide rather than reveal. She had a life before this, a life she had left behind, or lost, or fled. And whatever that life had been, it had not prepared her to be what she was now, a housemaid in a quiet townhouse, folding linens and lighting fires, her hands still soft, her voice still careful, her eyes still full of something she would not name. She was only a servant, but servants do not weep over letters written on paper too fine for their station, and they do not carry them hidden against their hearts, like relics of a world they can no longer enter.
Chapter 4. What She Would Not Say. Several days passed before I spoke to her again. I did not avoid her deliberately, or perhaps I did. I could not be certain of my own motives. The incident with the letter had unsettled me in ways I did not fully understand, and I found myself unwilling to examine the feeling too closely. But the house was not large, and eventually, as such things happen, we found ourselves alone. It was late afternoon. The light was fading early, as it does in October, and I had gone to the small back garden to walk among the last of the season's flowers. The air was cool and smelled of damp earth, of fallen leaves, of something ending. I did not expect to find her there. She was sitting on the wooden bench beneath the apple tree, her hands folded in her lap, her face turned toward the sky. She was not working, she was not waiting. She was simply present, in that particular way she had, as though she existed slightly apart from the world around her. She saw me and rose at once, her expression closing like a door. "Forgive me, sir. I did not know you would be walking. I will return to the house." "There is no need," I said. "The garden is large enough for two." She hesitated. I could see the conflict in her, the trained instinct to defer, to withdraw, to make herself invisible, and something else beneath it, something that did not wish to leave. "Sit," I said, more gently. "I did not mean to disturb you." She sat. I remained standing a few paces away, looking not at her, but at the ivy climbing the far wall. The silence between us was not uncomfortable, but it was full of things unsaid, things unasked. I had not intended to speak of the letter, but the question rose in me before I could stop it. "You are not from this county," I said. It was not a question. "No, sir." Her voice was quiet. "I am not." "May I ask where?" A pause. "The north, a small village. You would not know it." I nodded, though I did not believe her. Her accent held no trace of the north, no flattened vowels, no regional color. She spoke like someone who had been taught to speak, not like someone who had learned by listening to the people around her. "And your family?" I asked.
Are they still there?" She did not answer at once. When she spoke, her voice was very low. "I have no family, sir. Not any longer." I should have stopped there. A gentleman does not interrogate a servant about her private sorrows, but something in her voice, the weight of it, the quiet finality, made me want to understand. "I am sorry," I said. "I did not mean to cause you pain." She looked up at me then, and for a moment her composure faltered. I saw beneath the mask she wore so carefully a woman who had lost more than she could speak of, more perhaps than I could imagine. "You have caused me nothing, sir," she said. "The pain was there before I came to this house. It will be there after I leave." "Must you leave?" The question surprised us both. I had not meant to ask it, and yet, having asked, I found I did not wish to take it back. She looked away, toward the garden wall, toward the ivy and the fading light. "Everyone leaves, sir," she said quietly. "It is only a matter of when." We sat in silence for a time. The wind stirred the branches of the apple tree, and a few dry leaves drifted down between us. I wanted to ask her more about the letter, about her past, about the sorrow I saw in her eyes, but I could feel the boundary she had drawn, invisible but firm. She would not speak of it, not to me, perhaps not to anyone. And yet, I realized, with a strange ache I did not expect, that I had no right to ask. I was her employer's son. I was a stranger to her, despite the weeks she had spent under this roof. Whatever her secrets were, they were hers to keep. "And yet, if you ever have need of assistance," I said slowly, choosing my words with care, "you may speak to me. I would not betray a confidence." She turned to look at me. Her gray-blue eyes searched my face as though weighing something, my sincerity, perhaps, or my worth. "You are kind, sir," she said at last, "but there are some things that cannot be helped, only borne."
It was not the sentiment of a housemaid. It was the sentiment of someone who had known loss, real loss, the kind that remakes a person from the inside, the kind that teaches you to speak carefully, to move quietly, to keep your grief folded small and hidden, like a letter tucked beneath your apron. I did not know who she had been. I did not know what had brought her here, to this quiet house, to this quiet life so clearly not her own. But I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my chest, that she had once been someone else entirely, and that whoever she had been, she had loved, and had been loved in return. Chapter 5. The Truth Quietly Told. It was nearly the end of October when I learned the truth. The revelation did not come as I might have expected, not through confrontation, not through accident, not through the intervention of some outside force. It came, as such things often do, in a moment of stillness, when the ordinary rhythms of the house gave way to something unguarded. It came because she chose to tell me. The evening had been quiet. My mother had retired early, complaining of the cold, and I had taken my supper alone in the dining room, attended only by Mrs. Hewitt. Afterward, I wandered to the drawing room with a book I did not intend to read, and sat by the fire, watching the flames. I heard the door open softly. I did not turn. "Shall I tend the fire, sir?" It was Ellen's voice. I nodded, still gazing at the hearth, and listened as she crossed the room and knelt beside the grate. She worked quietly, adding coal, adjusting the logs with the iron poker. The firelight caught her profile,
the delicate line of her jaw, the pale curve of her cheek, the shadow beneath her eyes. When she finished, she did not rise. She remained kneeling, her hands resting on her lap, her gaze fixed on the flames. "You have been kind to me, Mr. Ashford, kinder than you know." "I have done nothing." "You have not pressed me. You have not demanded answers I could not give." She paused. "That is more than kindness. That is grace." I did not know how to respond. The intimacy of the moment, the firelight, the silence, her kneeling figure, made words feel insufficient. "I have wondered," I admitted, "but I did not think it my place to ask." She looked up at me then. Her eyes were bright, not with tears, but with something else, a kind of resolve, as though she had reached a decision she could not take back. "And if I were to tell you," she asked, "would you hear me?" "Yes," I said, "I would." She rose and sat in the chair opposite mine, her hands folded in her lap. The fire crackled between us. For a long moment she said nothing, and I understood that she was gathering herself, preparing to speak of things long buried. When she began, her voice was steady but soft. "My name is not Ellen, it is Eleanor, Eleanor Vane. My father was a clergyman, a good man, learned and gentle, who held a living in Hertfordshire. We were not wealthy, but we were comfortable. I had a mother who loved music, a brother who read too much, and a home full of laughter." She paused. Her gaze drifted to the fire. "I was educated as a gentleman's daughter. I read Latin and French. I played the pianoforte. I was taught to dance, to converse, to carry myself with propriety. My father believed that a woman's mind deserved cultivation, and he gave me every advantage he could afford." I listened in silence. The picture she painted was so far from the woman I had seen scrubbing floors and carrying trays that it seemed almost impossible. And yet, as she spoke, I knew it was true. I had seen the evidence in every small detail I had tried to ignore. "What happened?" I asked gently. Her hands tightened in her lap. "My father died when I was 19, a fever, sudden and swift. He left us with nothing, or nearly nothing. The living passed to another man. My mother's health, already fragile, declined. Within a year, she followed him." "And your brother?" A shadow crossed her face. "He had debts. He had habits. When our parents died, he inherited what little remained. He sold the house, the books, everything, and then he vanished, to the continent, I was told, to escape his creditors. I have not seen him since." She spoke without bitterness, but I could hear the wound beneath her words, the betrayal of it, the loneliness. "I was left with nothing," she continued. "No family, no income, no home. I had two choices: to marry without affection, if anyone would have me, or to find a way to survive on my own." "And so you entered service?" "Yes," she met my eyes. "I changed my name. I learned to lower my gaze, to soften my speech, to make myself small. I learned to become invisible." The fire had burned low. I rose and added another log, more to give myself a moment than for necessity. When I turned back, she was watching me, her expression uncertain. "You must think me deceitful," she said. "No." I sat down again, closer this time. "I think you did what you had to do to survive. There is no shame in that." "There is shame," she said quietly. "Every day there is shame. To pretend to be less than you are, to hide what you know, what you love, what you remember. It is a kind of slow death, Mr. Ashford, a death of the self." I thought of the letter, the tears I had heard through the door, the way she had looked at the book of verse as though it were a window into a life she could no longer reach. "The letter," I said. "The one you dropped." She nodded. "From a friend, a woman I knew in my former life, the only one who still writes to me. She does not know where I am, only that I am safe. I write to her through an intermediary, a bookseller in London who forwards our correspondence. It is the only thread I have left." "And you carry it with you?" "Yes," her voice faltered for the first time. "It reminds me that I was once someone, that I had a name, a home, a place in the world, that I was not always this." I did not know what to say. What words could answer such a confession? What comfort could I offer that would seem hollow or presumptuous or false? But she did not seem to expect an answer. She rose, smoothing her apron, her composure returning like a garment she had briefly set aside. "I have burdened you enough," she said. "Forgive me. I should not have spoken." "I am glad you did." She looked at me, a long, searching look, as though she were trying to see something in me that she had not seen before. "You are a good man, Mr. Ashford," she said softly. "I knew it the first day I came to this house. I saw it in the way you looked at the garden, the way you held your book, the way you said nothing when you might have said much." She curtsied and moved toward the door. "Eleanor," I said. She stopped. It was the first time I had spoken her true name. "You are not invisible, not to me." For a moment she stood motionless. Then, without turning, she nodded once, opened the door, and was gone.
Chapter 6. What Remained. She did not leave. I had half expected her to go, to vanish one morning without explanation, as though our conversation had never taken place. I would not have blamed her. To be seen, truly seen, after so long in hiding, it must have felt like a kind of exposure, a risk she had not intended to take. But she stayed. And in the weeks that followed, something shifted between us, not in word, not in gesture, but in the quality of the silence we shared. When we passed in the corridor, there was a flicker of recognition, a softening at the edges. When she brought tea to my study, she no longer lowered her eyes. She looked at me, briefly, quietly, and I looked back. We did not speak of what she had told me. There was no need. The knowing was enough. November came, and with it the first true cold. The garden grew bare, the ivy on the wall turned rust and brown, and the house drew inward, lit by candles and warmed by fires that never quite reached the corners of the rooms. I found myself thinking of her often, not with longing precisely, but with a kind of quiet attention. I thought of her hands, still soft despite the work. I thought of her voice, careful and clear. I thought of the life she had lost, the home she could not return to, the name she had folded away like a letter too precious to open. And I thought of myself. What had I ever lost? What had I ever risked? I had lived my whole life in safety, in comfort, in the gentle shelter of expectation. I had never been forced to become someone else. I had never had to hide what I was in order to survive. And yet, in some way I could not quite name, I felt that I had been hiding too. One evening, near the end of November, I found her in the drawing room after supper. She was not working. She was standing by the pianoforte, her fingers resting lightly on the keys, not pressing them, only touching, as though she were remembering something she had lost the right to play. I stood in the doorway and watched her.
"Do you miss it?" I asked. She did not startle. Perhaps she had heard me come in. Perhaps she had simply learned to expect my presence. "Every day," she said. "Would you play if I asked you to?" She turned to look at me. Her expression was difficult to read. Gratitude, perhaps, and sorrow, and something else, something that looked almost like hope. "It has been a long time," she said. "I am not sure I remember." "Then let it be imperfect," I said. "Let it be only for yourself." She hesitated. Then, slowly, she sat down on the bench and placed her hands on the keys. The first notes were uncertain, halting, but as she played, her fingers found their way and the music rose, a simple air, nothing grand, but played with a tenderness that made my chest ache. She did not look at me. Her eyes were closed, her lips slightly parted, and in that moment she was no longer a servant in a borrowed dress. She was Eleanor Vane, a clergyman's daughter, a woman of learning and grace, someone who had once belonged to a world that had since closed its doors to her. When the music ended, she sat very still. I did not applaud. I did not speak. I simply stood there, bearing witness. I wish I could say that I saved her, that I offered her a new life, a restored name, a future worthy of her past. But I did not. I was not brave enough. I was not certain enough. The world in which we lived did not permit such crossings, not easily, not without cost. And I did not know if she would have accepted, even if I had found the words to ask. What I did was smaller. I spoke to my mother, carefully, obliquely, about the value of education in a servant, the benefit of having someone in the house who could read aloud, who could assist with correspondence, who could be trusted with tasks beyond the ordinary. My mother, who cared more for comfort than convention, agreed without much interest. And so Eleanor remained, not as a housemaid, but something in between, a companion of sorts, a presence in the quieter rooms of the house, permitted to read, to write, to sit by the fire in the evenings when her work was done. It was not freedom, it was not restoration, but it was something. Years have passed since then, many years. My mother is gone now. The house on Barton Lane belongs to strangers. I live elsewhere, in rooms that do not remember me, surrounded by books I have read too many times. And Eleanor? She left eventually, not in flight, but in peace. A distant cousin of her father's was found, an elderly woman in Bath who had need of a companion and did not care about scandal or status. Eleanor wrote to me once after she had settled there. A brief letter, formal in tone, but with a single line at the end that I have never forgotten. "You saw me when I had forgotten how to be seen. I will carry that with me always." I never wrote back. I did not know what to say. But I have thought of her across the years. I have thought of her hands on the keys of the pianoforte. I have thought of her voice in the firelight telling me the story she had told no one else. I have thought of the letter she carried beneath her apron, the thread that connected her to a life she could no longer live. She was only a servant. That is what the world believed. That is what I, too, once believed, or tried to believe. But I know now what I knew then in the quiet of that autumn in the small house on Barton Lane. She was never only anything. None of us are.